Hi, I'm Emily Parker, and this is the story of how my perfect sister's dream wedding turned into a nightmare. Not because I wanted revenge, but because sometimes the truth refuses to stay buried. I was adopted by the Parkers when I was 6 months old. My parents, especially my dad, James Parker, always made sure I never felt different from my biological sister Kate, who was born 2 years after they adopted me. At least, that's what I thought for 28 years. Dad's company, Parker Innovation Lab, was his pride and joy. It was a small research and development firm that created custom solutions for manufacturing companies. I grew up watching him pour his heart into it, spending late nights in his home office reviewing projects and proposals. While Kate excelled in dance recitals and beauty pageants, I inherited Dad's passion for innovation. I spent my summers interning at the company, learning every aspect of the business. After getting my engineering degree, I joined full-time as a project manager. That was 8 years ago. Since then, I'd worked my way up to Chief Innovation Officer, helping transform our small family business into an industry leader worth over $100 million. Kate, meanwhile, had become a successful social media influencer, posting about her luxury lifestyle and doling out relationship advice. The problem started when Kate got engaged to Thomas Bradford II, heir to Bradford Technologies, one of our biggest competitors. "This merger of families will be perfect for business," Mom gushed during Kate's engagement party at our family estate. Champagne was flowing, and everyone who was anyone in the tech industry had been invited. I should have seen the signs earlier, the hushed conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, the strange looks from board members, the way Dad had been avoiding one-on-one meetings with me for weeks. But I was blindsided. Kate clanked her crystal champagne flute, gathering everyone's attention. She stood on the mansion's grand staircase, her designer dress sparkling under the chandelier lights. Thomas stood beside her, looking every bit the proud future CEO he was being groomed to be. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate our engagement," Kate beamed. "But there's something else we need to address tonight." My stomach dropped as her eyes found me in the crowd. "Emily, dear sister," her voice dripped with false concern, "we need to talk about the money." The room fell silent. I clutched my glass tighter. "What money?" "The $2 million that's missing from the company accounts," she said for dramatic effect. "The money you've been embezzling for the past year." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Whispers erupted around the room. I looked to Dad for support, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. "What are you talking about?" I managed to say. "I would never—" "We have proof," Thomas interrupted, pulling out a folder. "Financial records showing systematic theft through a series of cleverly hidden transactions, all traced back to your personal accounts." I felt the room spinning. "Dad, you know I would never steal from the company. Everything I've done has been for—" "Save it," Kate snapped. "You're just the adopted one trying to steal what rightfully belongs to the real Parker family. It's time to pay it all back." The silence that followed her words was deafening. I waited for Dad to defend me, to say something, anything. Instead, he slowly nodded. "The evidence is quite clear, Emily," he said quietly. "I think it would be best if you resigned immediately. We won't press charges if you return the money." In that moment, everything I thought I knew about my family shattered. 28 years of love and belonging crumbled under the weight of one accusation. I set my glass down carefully on a nearby table. "You want me to resign? Fine, I quit. But you should check those financial records more carefully before you make accusations." I walked out of the party with my head held high, ignoring the whispers and stares. As I reached my car, I heard Kate's voice ring out from the doorway. "Don't forget to return your company laptop and phone. We wouldn't want you deleting any evidence." I smiled despite the tears threatening to fall. My sister had always been so focused on appearances that she never bothered to learn how the company actually worked. She had no idea that for the past 3 years, I'd been documenting everything. That night, as I sat in my home office, I began implementing the contingency plan I'd created but hoped never to use. Years of watching other family businesses implode had taught me to always be prepared for betrayal. I pulled out my personal laptop and accessed a secure server that Kate and Thomas didn't know existed. Every email, every transaction, every piece of evidence showing who had really been stealing from the company. It was all there, waiting to be revealed. Kate's wedding was in a week. She'd planned an extravagant ceremony at the city's most exclusive venue, with over 500 guests, including every major player in the tech industry. She'd spent months ensuring it would be the social event of the year. Little did she know, I had my own plans for her special day. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone's future, it's about revealing the truth about their past. As I prepared for bed that night, my phone buzzed with a text from Kate. "Don't even think about coming to the wedding. Security has your photo," I replied with a simple smiley face emoji. She had no idea that I didn't need an invitation to crash her perfect day. After all, I designed the venue's security system myself. The next 7 days would change everything. But first, I had some calls to make. The morning of Kate's wedding dawned bright and clear. While she was probably getting her hair and makeup done at the Peninsula Hotel's presidential suite, I was in my home office, making final preparations. The last week had been a whirlwind. I'd reached out to key industry contacts, set up meetings with the SEC, and gathered irrefutable evidence of what had really been happening at Parker Innovation Labs. But my most important call had been to someone Kate had completely forgotten about, our company's original programmer, Old Joe. Joe had worked for Dad since the beginning, creating our core software systems. Kate and Thomas thought he'd retired 6 months ago. They didn't know he still maintained backdoor access to all the company servers. "Got everything," I texted Joe at 9:00 a.m. "All downloaded and verified," he replied. "They never changed the master passwords, amateurs." I smiled, thinking of Kate's face when she realized her clever financial tricks weren't so clever after all. The money she'd accused me of stealing, every penny, could be traced back to offshore accounts belonging to her fiancé's family. At precisely 2 p.m., I parked my car 2 blocks from the St. Regis Hotel. The wedding was scheduled for 4 p.m. in the Grand Ballroom. Security was tight, Kate had made sure of that, but she'd forgotten one crucial detail. I'd installed the hotel's entire security infrastructure 3 years ago through Parker Innovation Labs. I walked through the service entrance, nodding to the kitchen staff who recognized me from the system installation. My fingerprint still worked on the biometric locks, another oversight. I made my way to the control room where my old friend Marcus was working security. "Emily?" He looked surprised. "They said you were banned." I handed him a USB drive. "Marcus, remember when I saved your job last year after that breach? I need a favor." 20 minutes later, I was settled in the ballroom's upper control booth. Below, guests were arriving, the who's who of the tech industry, all dressed in their finest. Mom was greeting people, wearing an expensive new dress. Dad stood with Thomas's parents, probably discussing the merger they'd announced yesterday. The merger that would save Bradford Technologies from bankruptcy using Parker Innovation Labs' money. My money, the money Kate accused me of stealing. At 3:55 p.m., Kate made her grand entrance for photos. She looked stunning in her designer gown, beaming as cameras flashed. Thomas waited at the altar, looking every bit the proud groom. I waited until the ceremony began, until the minister asked if anyone had any objections. That's when I activated Joe's program. The ballroom lights dimmed. The massive screens meant for wedding photos came to life. And there, in high definition, began playing a presentation I'd titled, "The Truth About the Parker Family Fortune." Financial records, emails, secret meetings, every corrupt dealing, every stolen dollar, every lie, displayed for all to see. Kate's face went from confusion to horror as she watched proof of her fiancé's embezzlement scheme unfold on the screen. "Turn it off!" Thomas shouted, but the hotel systems weren't responding to anyone but me. Then came the recording, a conversation between Kate and Thomas from 3 months ago. "Once we frame Emily for the missing money," Kate's voice filled the ballroom, "Dad will have to give me control of the company. The adopted brat never deserved it anyway." "And once we merge the companies," Thomas replied, "we can sell off Parker's assets to cover Bradford's debts. Your father will never know what hit him." The screen switched to security footage of them doctoring financial records in Thomas's office, carefully crafting the trail that would lead to me. The ballroom erupted in chaos. I emerged from the control booth, walking calmly down the main aisle as the room buzzed with confusion and outrage. Kate stood frozen in her white dress, mascara running down her cheeks. "Security!" she screamed when she saw me. "They work for me," I said quietly. Or rather, they work for Parker Innovation Lab's security division, which I built from the ground up. Dad stepped forward, his face ashen. "Emily, Save it," I cut him off. "Check your email. You'll find copies of everything you just saw, plus documentation of every innovation and client relationship I brought to the company. My resignation terms are attached. You have 1 hour to accept them." "You're bluffing," Thomas snarled. "You've got nothing." I smiled. "The SEC disagrees. They're very interested in Bradford Technologies' creative accounting, as are your shareholders." I nodded toward several pale-faced board members in the crowd. "And Kate, you were right about one thing. I'm not a real Parker. I'm better. I built that company into what it is today while you were busy taking selfies and plotting theft." Mom tried to approach me, but I held up my hand. "My terms are simple. I take 51% ownership of Parker Innovation Labs, effective immediately. Kate and Thomas are banned from any involvement in the company. And Dad, you can keep your position as figurehead CEO, but your voting rights go to me." "And if we refuse?" Kate's voice shook. "Then I release everything to the media. Parker Innovation Labs might survive the scandal. Bradford Technologies won't." I turned to the shocked guests. "I suggest you all go home. I don't think there's going to be a wedding today." The next few hours were a blur of lawyers, documents, and tears. By midnight, I was in control of the company I'd helped build. Bradford Technology stock was in free fall, and Kate's perfect wedding had become the scandal of the year. 1 week later, I sat in my new office, formerly Dad's, reviewing acquisition proposals for what remained of Bradford Technologies. A knock at the door interrupted my work. It was Dad, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "I should have believed in you," he said quietly. "Yes, you should have." "Can we fix this?" I thought about it. Maybe. Not as father and daughter. You lost that right at the engagement party. But as business partners, we'll see. He nodded sadly and left. I turned back to my window, looking out at the city skyline. My phone buzzed. A text from Kate. "I'm sorry. I was wrong about everything." I didn't reply. Some apologies come too late. They say success is the best revenge, but I disagree. The best revenge is forcing people to face their own lies. Kate wanted a wedding that everyone would remember. Well, she got her wish, just not in the way she planned. As for me, I'm still the same person who loves innovation and building things. The only difference is now everyone knows what I'm capable of, and no one will ever call me just the adopted one again. The dust settled, but the air remained thick with unspoken words and raw emotions. Life at Parker Innovation Labs was different. The employees, once buzzing with gossip and uncertainty, now looked at me with a newfound respect, even a hint of awe. I was no longer just Emily, the Chief Innovation Officer. I was Emily Parker, the woman who single-handedly brought down a corrupt fiancé and saved the company from a hostile takeover. Dad and I navigated our new roles with a careful formality. He still occupied the CEO's office, but the real decisions were made in mine. Our conversations revolved around business strategy and market analysis, the comfortable familiarity of our shared passion for innovation, a fragile bridge over the chasm that had opened between us. Mom, on the other hand, remained distant. Her disappointment was a palpable weight in the house, a constant reminder of the family I'd fractured. She couldn't bring herself to look at me, let alone speak to me. Her silence was a sharper accusation than any words Kate could have hurled. I buried myself in work, finding solace in the familiar rhythm of project deadlines and client meetings. Parker Innovation Labs thrived under my leadership. We secured new contracts, expanded our research and development, and even began exploring international markets. My vision for the company, once stifled by bureaucracy and tradition, was finally taking shape. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I noticed a familiar figure sitting on a bench across the street. It was Joe, his weathered face etched with worry. "Emily," he said, rising slowly as I approached. "Can we talk?" We walked in silence to a nearby cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee a comforting counterpoint to the tension hanging in the air. "I did what you asked," Joe said, his voice heavy. "But it doesn't feel right. Kate, she's your sister." "She tried to destroy me, Joe," I replied, my voice flat. "She stole from the company, from Dad, from me. She lied and manipulated everyone around her." I know, he sighed. "But she's still family. This isn't how families are supposed to be." His words echoed the unspoken ache in my own heart. Despite everything, a part of me still longed for the family I thought we had, the unconditional love and support I'd always believed in. "What would you have me do, Joe?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a sadness that mirrored my own. "I don't know, Emily. I just wish things were different." We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of unspoken regrets and shattered dreams pressing down on us. As I left the cafe, Joe's words lingered in my mind, a poignant reminder of the complex web of love and betrayal that bound us together. The weeks blurred into months. The scandal faded from the headlines, replaced by the next sensational story. Bradford Technologies, stripped of its assets and reputation, was swallowed whole by a larger corporation. Thomas, disgraced and disinherited, disappeared from the public eye. Kate, however, remained a thorn in my side. She launched a relentless campaign to rehabilitate her image, portraying herself as a victim of circumstance, a naive pawn in her fiancé's schemes. Her social media following, though diminished, remained loyal, fueled by her carefully curated narrative of betrayal and redemption. She gave interviews, wrote blog posts, and even published a tell-all book, conveniently omitting her own role in the embezzlement scheme. Her words, laced with half-truths and veiled accusations, chipped away at my resolve. Doubt crept into my mind, whispering insidious questions. Had I been too harsh? Was there another way to handle the situation? Had I sacrificed my family for the sake of the company? One rainy afternoon, I found myself drawn to a familiar park, a place where Dad used to take Kate and me when we were children. As I sat on a weathered bench, memories flooded back. Picnics under the old oak tree, laughter echoing through the playground, the comforting warmth of Dad's hand holding mine. A figure emerged from the mist, her silhouette outlined against the gray sky. It was Kate. She walked towards me, her face pale and drawn, her usual vibrancy replaced by a quiet desperation. "Emily," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk?" We sat in silence, the only sound the gentle patter of rain on the leaves. Finally she spoke, her voice raw with emotion. "I know I messed up," she admitted, her eyes fixed on the ground. "I was greedy, selfish. I never meant to hurt you." "But you did," I said, my voice tight. "You tried to destroy everything I'd worked for." "I know," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I was so caught up in my own world, my own desires, that I didn't see the damage I was causing. I lost everything, Emily. My fiancé, my reputation, my family." Her voice trailed off, the unspoken plea for forgiveness hanging in the air. I looked at her, my heart a battlefield of conflicting emotions. Anger, hurt, and a lingering sense of betrayal warred with the faint embers of sisterly love. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Kate," I said, my voice heavy. "But I can understand." A flicker of hope ignited in her eyes. That's enough," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but knowing you understand, it means more than you know." We sat in silence for a long moment, the rain washing away the remnants of bitterness and resentment. As Kate walked away, a fragile sense of peace settled over me. The past couldn't be erased, but perhaps, just perhaps, we could find a way to heal the wounds and rebuild our fractured bond. The conversation with Kate in the park marked a turning point. It wasn't a reconciliation, not yet. But it was a crack in the wall that had separated us. We began to speak, tentatively at first, then with increasing ease. The shared memories of our childhood, the laughter and tears we'd experienced together, formed a fragile bridge across the chasm of betrayal. Mom, sensing the shift in our relationship, slowly began to emerge from her self-imposed exile. She joined our conversations, her hesitant smiles a balm on my wounded spirit. The house, once filled with tension and unspoken accusations, gradually regained its warmth. Even Dad seemed to soften. He started inviting me to join him for his morning walks, our conversations a mix of business strategy and personal reflections. He spoke of his regrets, his shame at doubting me, his pride in my accomplishments. The father I'd thought I'd lost was slowly re-emerging, his love and respect for me evident in his eyes. One evening, as we were having dinner together, Mom announced that she was organizing a family gathering. "It's time we put all this behind us," she declared, her voice firm. "We're a family, and we need to start acting like one." The gathering was a small affair, just the four of us. We ate, we laughed, we shared stories. It wasn't perfect, the echoes of the past still lingered. But it was a start. As I looked around the table, at the faces of the people I loved, a sense of hope bloomed in my heart. Life moved forward. Parker Innovation Labs continued to thrive, expanding its reach and influence. I found myself drawn to mentoring young entrepreneurs, sharing my knowledge and experience, encouraging them to pursue their dreams with passion and integrity. Kate, true to her nature, reinvented herself. She leveraged her social media savvy to launch a successful online platform promoting ethical business practices and supporting women in technology. She even reached out to me, offering to collaborate on a project to encourage young girls to pursue careers in STEM fields. One sunny afternoon, as I was walking through the park where Kate and I had met months earlier, I saw her sitting on a bench, a baby girl sleeping peacefully in her arms. She looked up, her face radiant with joy. "Emily, come meet your niece," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "Her name is Lily." I gazed at the tiny face, a perfect blend of Kate and her husband, a man she'd met after the scandal, a man who knew her past and loved her anyway. As I held Lily in my arms, a wave of emotion washed over me. Forgiveness, acceptance, love, they intertwined, creating a tapestry of healing and hope. The past would always be a part of our story, a reminder of the fragility of trust and the enduring power of family, but it no longer defined us. We had found a way to move forward, to rebuild our bonds, to create a new narrative, one filled with love, forgiveness, and the unwavering belief in the strength of family, in all its messy, complicated glory. And as I looked at Lily, her tiny hand grasping my finger, I knew that the future held endless possibilities, not just for her, but for all of us. We had weathered the storm, emerged stronger, and found our way back to each other. And that, I realized, was the greatest innovation of all. Story 2. The headline of the tale is, "My fiancé made fun of my career at her office party." In front of everyone, I called it quits on the engagement. Hello everyone. Prior to starting today's video, I need your assistance. One of the greatest ways you can help us out is to subscribe. Since we've observed the channel is losing some of its popularity, it's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. Hello Reddit. I finally decided to share this after sitting on it for a while, trying to figure out what happened. I am an electrician by trade. I will not sugarcoat the situation. I adore my work. Of all, it's hardly the sort of thing that people boast about at elegant dinner parties or include in movies. However, I've been doing manual labor since I was a youngster, and I'm skilled at it. Nor did I just happen to stumble across this. I put forth a lot of effort to get here. I worked long hours as an apprentice to get experience, attended trade school for years, and took on side jobs to pay for my equipment. In a sector where one's reputation can make or ruin one's career, I had to prove myself at every turn. It's really exciting to fix something damaged and watch it function again, and I've spent many hours learning circuits, panels, and wiring. In addition, I've made a respectable living from it. I manage my own little business, doing everything from creative lighting installations for companies to house maintenance. Reaching the point where I could manage my own business wasn't simple, but it was worthwhile. In addition to having devoted customers and a nice truck, I'm currently saving money for my first home. Although it's not particularly ostentatious, I wouldn't trade it for anything because it's honest work. Though I'll admit that I've had to deal with people who despise what I do, I've always been proud of where I am. You are aware of the kind. I believed that my fiancée, Lisa, a 30-year-old woman, wasn't one of those people who believe that true success entails working in a cubicle or holding a long title like senior executive. I've been dating Lisa for roughly 4 years. She works in corporate marketing, a field I've always tried to respect but don't really understand. I felt like a normal guy standing next to a magazine cover because of her ambition, drive, and polish. She is the type of person who organizes everything, including our 5-year goals and weekend brunches. That was something I liked about her. I believed that we were mutually balanced. She is the polished go-getter, and I am the hands-on problem solver. Initially, Lisa would express her admiration for my work ethic. She would say things like, "You're so good with your hands," or "I love how passionate you are about what you do." It's amazing. I accepted that since it was nice to have someone support me, especially someone like Lisa who made the effort to find me, even though she could have chosen any kind of suit and tie. She once told me, "Because you're a real man," in response to my question about why she was so interested in me. But now that I'm looking back, I think there were signs that she didn't really respect me or what I do. It's just that I ignored them. For example, there was this one time when we were talking about future goals, and I said I wanted to expand my business. Maybe hire a couple of guys to work under me, so I wasn't always on the job myself. Her response? "That's cute, babe. You'd be like a little boss." I laughed it off at the time, but now it feels like one of those comments that wasn't as innocent as it seemed. Then there was the way she talked about her own career. She'd go on and on about how hard it was to get where she is, how she had to prove herself in a male-dominated industry, and how she's always working twice as hard as everyone else. Don't get me wrong, I respected the hell out of her hustle. But looking back, I realized she never really asked about my work in the same way. Like, she never cared about the struggles I had running my own business, or the times I had to work 12-hour days in someone's attic during a heat wave just to make ends meet. Still, I never thought it was a big deal. I figured we just had different ways of showing support. She was all about big, flashy gestures, posting pictures of us with captions like "so proud of my guy," while I was more low-key. I'd show up to her work events, listen to her vent about her boss, and make sure she had dinner waiting when she got home late. To me, that was enough. Things started to feel off earlier this year, though. Lisa got a promotion, and suddenly her life became all about networking and corporate events. She started talking about her colleagues constantly. This guy who's a rising star in the industry. That woman who's such a powerhouse. I noticed she didn't mention me as much anymore when I asked about it. She brushed it off, saying, "You're not part of that world, babe. It's not a big deal." That stung a little, but I let it go. I figured she was just caught up in the excitement of her new role. Then came the co-workers' holiday party. Lisa had been talking about it for weeks. She kept saying it was a big deal and that it was important. "I come with her. You'll love it," she said. "You'll get to see the people I work with and the world I live in." I wasn't exactly thrilled about spending a night with a bunch of corporate types, but I figured it was important to her and I wanted to be by her side. So I agreed. As the date got closer, I started to feel more and more out of my element. Lisa was planning everything down to the last detail. What we'd wear, what time we'd arrive, even what kind of conversations I should prepare for. "Just talk about your business," she said. People love hearing about small businesses that should have been my first red flag. Why would I need to prepare to talk about what I do? But again, I brushed it off. I wanted to be there for her, even if it meant stepping into a world that felt completely foreign to me. The night of the party, I put on my one good suit and did my best to clean up. Lisa looked incredible, like she always does, in this sleek black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. When we got to the venue, I realized just how out of place I was. The place was decked out with fancy decorations. Everyone was dressed to the nines, moving through the room like they were on a runway. I was trying my best to play along, even though this whole thing feels like stepping onto a set of The Office. But you know, way less funny and way more fake. People are walking around in their overpriced suits and shoes talking about brand initiatives and quarterly projections. Meanwhile, I'm just trying to keep my tie from choking me to death. Lisa's in her element, though. She's laughing, working the room, and introducing me to everyone like she's the star of the show. Honestly, I was kind of proud of her at first. I mean, she's good at what she does, and it's obvious her colleagues respect her. But the more she introduced me to people, the more it started to feel off. It started small. Every time she'd introduce me, she'd throw in some little comment that felt like a jab, like, "This is my fiancé. He's an electrician. He keeps things running around the house." Or if you ever need someone to fix your outlets, he's your guy. She'd laugh, and so would they. But I wasn't laughing. I brushed it off the first couple of times, telling myself she was just nervous or trying to be funny. But after the fifth or sixth time, I started to wonder if this was just how she talked about me behind my back. Anyway, Lisa and I were standing with a group of her colleagues when one guy, a real smug-looking dude in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my truck, asked me what I do for a living. I smiled and told him, "I'm an electrician. I run my own business. Simple and plain." Before he could say anything, Lisa jumped in. "Oh, he's amazing with his hands," she said with this overly sweet tone that immediately made me cringe. "He's like my little handyman at home. Anytime something breaks, he's on it. Isn't that adorable?" Adorable. That word hit hard. The way she said, it wasn't affectionate. It was condescending, like I was some kind of pet she brought to show off. The group burst out laughing, and I just stood there trying to keep my face neutral. Inside, I was fuming. I wanted to say something, but I didn't want to make a scene, so I just smiled awkwardly and nodded like I was in on the joke, but I wasn't. I was done. The rest of the night didn't get better. Every time we talked to someone new, Lisa found a new way to put me down. Whether it was calling me her fix-it guy or joking about how I probably didn't get their world of corporate marketing. At one point, I heard her telling someone, "Oh yes, he's my little wires and pliers person like Bob the Builder, but less ambitious." I was standing there thinking, did she just reduce my job to a joke? I let it slip, attempting to maintain the peace, but it didn't end there. What really ticked me off was how nonchalant she was about it. Like, she didn't even notice she was insulting me. Or worst, she noticed and just didn't care. The way she looked at me when she made those statements, it wasn't love or pride. It was a pity, like I was some small-town man who got lucky to be with her and should just be grateful for the worst part. Everyone else appeared to gobble it up. They were laughing along with her, like her comments were the greatest thing they'd ever heard. And why wouldn't they? In their view, I was just the blue-collar man following along with the corporate queen. They didn't know me or what I'd constructed for myself. All they saw was what Lisa was presenting them, someone to laugh at. By the time the toast came, I was already tuned out. Lisa got up in front of everyone, looking like she controlled the room, and started praising her crew for their hard work. I was partially listening, just trying to get through the night without losing it, when she suddenly said, "And I want to give a special shout-out to my fiancé." I looked up, thinking, maybe she's going to redeem herself, but nothing. "He's not really a corporate person," she remarked, beaming like she was going to unleash the best joke of the night. "But if anyone's dishwasher stops working, he's your guy." Laughter broke out throughout the room. As 100 pairs of eyes turned to me, I sat still. I had a burning sensation on my face. I turned to face Lisa in the hopes that she would see how embarrassed I was, but she was too preoccupied to notice. She was grinning as if she had just won a prize for the most amusing toast. It was more than I could handle. Excusing myself, I went outdoors to breathe. My chest felt constricted, and my hands were trembling. I kept repeating her words in my mind, each one becoming more powerful than the last. "Not a businessman. For power outages, are you your man?" What on earth had just occurred? There was no toast there. The takedown was that I'm standing outside this absurdly opulent location, attempting to cool off by inhaling the chilly air. I can still hear the laughter that filled the room as Lisa's toast was served. I'm not sure if I'm more upset or ashamed, or perhaps a combination of the two. I kept asking myself, has she always seen me like this? As convenient as those handymen she hired? Lisa emerges from the house a few minutes later. Her face is displaying a large, oblivious smile. "You're there, as if I were a lost child," she says. "You slip out, but why?" I try not to become angry as I stare at her, but I can already feel it building. Can you imagine how embarrassing that was? She blinks, obviously taken by surprise. "What are you discussing?" "The toast," I reply, raising my voice slightly. "In front of your whole office, you essentially make fun of me." Lisa rolls her eyes as if I'm the one who's acting irrationally. "Come on, please." "It was only a joke. Everyone found it amusing." "Yes, as they are unfamiliar with me." I lost my temper. "They just know what you said to them, that their dishwashers can be fixed by me, a non-corporate man." "How insulting is it? Do you even recognize it?" She lets out a sigh, as if speaking to a young kid. "You're going overboard." The depth wasn't that great. All I wanted to do was lighten the atmosphere, reduce the tension. I took a big breath and attempted to explain, even though I could feel my hand clenching at my sides. "I've put forth a ton of effort to get here, Lisa. I own my own company. I earn a respectable living. All of that was condensed into a punchline by you. What do you suppose my feelings are about that?" Rather than offering an apology or even making an effort to comprehend. Lisa gave me an irritated face while crossing her arms. "I'm not sure why you're taking this so personally. I didn't say anything false, really. You work as an electrician. The work isn't very glamorous. There it is. The reality. It's simple." Stunned, I look at her. "Wow," I said. "So that's your true opinion of me? As if I were a mere toolbox-wielding person fortunate enough to be with you." "That's not what I said. You're forcing me to say things. I'm only trying to tell you that you need to learn to accept humor. It's not about me here. It's about your lack of confidence." She began to shout. My lack of confidence. My blood began to boil. Right now, it has nothing to do with my insecurity. It's because you don't value me or my work. Are you even aware of how patronizing you came across tonight? You always sound so condescending. Lisa's expression grew tough. "What do you know? Perhaps I do believe you're exaggerating. Perhaps you ought to think about the reasons behind your defensiveness regarding your work. You wouldn't be bothered by a little teasing if you had self-confidence." I realized then that this was more than just a disagreement. This is an underlying issue. This is Lisa. I was not respected by her. She hasn't either. I try to steady my voice by taking a deep breath. "Lisa, you know what? I am no longer able to do this." She squinted. "What are you going to do?" I said, gesturing between us. This connection. I'm finished." Lisa looked at me as if I had suddenly developed a second head. Then she lets out a little incredulous laugh. "Are you serious? Are you truly going to end our relationship over a joke? It goes beyond the jest." I spoke aggressively. "It's your perception of me, the way you have always seen me. Lisa, you don't respect me. You haven't. Furthermore, I refuse to live my entire life being viewed as inferior to you, simply because I'm not an office worker." Her face changed from incredulous to angry. "Are you serious now? Are you even aware of your absurdity? Do you believe that your small company of repairing people's wiring makes you so unique? Guess what, though? It isn't that remarkable." Although her remarks were severe, they confirmed my choice. I offered her the engagement ring after removing it from my finger. "I wish you success in locating someone you truly admire." I spoke strongly and calmly. She gazed at the ring as if it were about to burst in her grasp. She said, "You're making a big mistake. Nobody else will tolerate your brittle ego." All I could say was, "Maybe not, but at least I'll be able to respect myself." After that, I left her standing out in the cold with the ring still in her hand and turned to go back inside the party to get my belongings. The noise of laughter and talking hit me like a wall as soon as I returned to the party to get my coat. There were still people in the room, but I could see them glancing at me. I was certain it would cause a stir. I honestly didn't give a damn. For the following 5 weeks, let them discuss it. Allow them to analyze each detail. I wanted Lisa and everyone there to remember this moment. She had been ripping me down all night. I reached for my coat, and now it was my chance to go on my terms. Behind me, I heard Lisa's heels click sharply. I was aware that she would not permit me to depart without a confrontation. "Will you actually do this?" She gave a hiss. She looked around anxiously to make sure nobody was listening, in the public eye. Slowly, I turned and met her gaze. I could sense all of her co-workers' interested looks. People's conversations were becoming quieter as they paid attention. "You did this previously, Lisa," I said, remaining composed but raising my voice loud enough for anybody in the vicinity to hear you cross the line and make fun of me in front of everyone. "I'm simply going to go before things worsen." Her eyes narrowed into a scowl after briefly widening. She spat out, "Don't be so dramatic," and grabbed my arm so hard that my jacket wrinkled. She attempted to remain calm, but her nails sank into my sleeve. Nobody even took attention. "You're exaggerating this situation." I released my arm and stepped back. "Really, after your brief toast, I'm very certain that half the crowd wasn't laughing with you, so I spoke louder. You ensured that they were making fun of me. That was not the case," she yelled, raising her voice slightly to get more attention. Around us, the buzz of discussion slowed down. People were no longer even acting as though they weren't paying attention. She argued that it was humorous, which is why they were laughing. Anger caused her cheeks to flush. "It is you who is making this a major issue." Stabilizing myself, I inhaled and let the stillness to linger for a while. "Lisa," I spoke aggressively, "I was made into a joke by you. Your lack of regard for me was made quite evident. Now when I'm unhappy, you're acting like I'm insane. Right now, can you even hear yourself?" Her cheeks flushed, but not because she was embarrassed. This was unadulterated anger. She folded her arms. "Everything I said is being misrepresented by you," she fired back. "I wanted you to be included. You ought to express gratitude to me for including you in the discussion, rather than pouting like a kid." "Thank you. I wasn't included. You made fun of me. You gave the impression that I was a simpleton who could just fix your lights." "Lisa, I'm not included in it. That is discrediting me in order to boost your self-esteem." A voice interrupted Lisa before she could reply. "Hello, how are things doing over here?" I turned to see a woman in a sharp suit, one of her co-workers, holding, and seemed uneasy. Lisa turned to her and flashed the most phony grin I've ever seen. She responded hurriedly, "Oh, it's okay. Just a little misunderstanding." She raised her voice by an octave. The woman looked from one of us to the other, obviously not persuaded. She gave me a pitying glance and then walked away, saying, "Well, if you need anything." The moment Lisa's coworker turned away, her smile vanished. "Can you see your actions?" Her voice was dripping with hatred as she shouted, "In front of my entire office, you're making me seem foolish." I couldn't contain my laughter. The room echoed with a sour sound. I shook my head and replied, "I'm embarrassing you. You treated me like a joke the entire night, and now you're preoccupied with your appearance. It's really wealthy." I couldn't resist laughing, a scathing noise that broke the tension. "I feel ashamed. You." Shaking my head, I said, "You treated me like a joke the entire night, and now you're preoccupied with your appearance. Incredibly so." I caught a glimpse of a tall man standing close to the door, observing us. He had a familiar appearance. Then I saw it was Lisa's supervisor. Although he remained silent, it was obvious that he was listening because of the way he crossed his arms and leaned slightly forward. Lisa also saw him. Her entire manner changed, and her face went pale. "Could we simply discuss this at a later time?" Her voice grew quieter all of a sudden. "You're creating a commotion." I thought it was precisely what I wanted, so I shook my head. "No, Lisa, this will not be done later. Right now, we're doing it. I refuse to live my entire life with someone who believes they are superior to me. Simply because I'm not an office worker, I'm worthy of better. More than you?" Lisa's gaze shifted between her employer, myself, and the increasing number of individuals feigning inattention. "All right." Her voice sounded almost like venom as she spoke. "Leave. But when you realize that no one else will tolerate your brittle ego, don't come to me in tears. I shook my head and couldn't help but smirk. I'm crying for you. I take it you're kidding. Finding someone who appreciates me won't be a problem for me. I didn't actually say it aloud. I didn't have to. As I stared at her, allowing her words to linger in the air, my expression and my silence spoke for themselves. I had no intention of becoming like her. Rather, I turned to go. I remarked, "Good luck finding someone who will put up with you. People, have fun at the celebration." As I turned and headed for the door behind me, I said over my shoulder. Like ripples in a pond, I could hear the whispers moving around the room. As I went by, I heard people whispering, looking at each other, and catching bits of their discussions. Have you noticed that? Why on earth was it happening? I didn't glance back, even though I thought she was a bit much. I didn't have to. I was aware of the harm done. Lisa desired to command attention. She had it now. As the woman who was called out in front of everyone, not as the party's queen, let them speak. I felt lighter than I have in years by the time I got to my car. It felt great to stand up for myself. Lisa was free to tell her narrative as she pleased, but I and everyone else who witnessed what transpired recognized the truth. Following the celebration, the days were chaotic. In a nutshell, Lisa continued to contact and text me. From, "Can we just talk about this?" to, "Full on," they varied. "You're behaving like a kid," and all the other extremes. None of them received a response from me. To be honest, I needed room. How could someone who I believed loved and respected me treat me like a joke? I had to find out what the devil had just occurred. Lisa, however, was not the kind to sit quietly. Oh no. On the third day, I began receiving messages from friends we had in common. It seems that she wasn't satisfied with simply blowing up my phone. She had to ensure that everyone else was aware of her side of the tale. "You freaked out over nothing," she says. "She's making it sound like you stormed out because you're too sensitive to handle a joke," one of my pals wrote me. I received screenshots from Lisa's social media accounts from another person. It was right there in the open. Because some people can't handle a strong woman with a sense of humor, she avoided a bullet in this article. Her buddies were talking her up in the comments. "You're worthy of better. He sounds very insecure. Goodbye. Uneasy." I was annoyed every time I saw that term, which kept popping up. I wasn't insecure. I was worn out. I'm sick of being minimized. I'm sick of being viewed as insufficient, as I didn't belong in her idealized business environment. After a few days, I received a message that completely stopped me in my tracks. It came from a colleague of Lisa's, someone who had attended the party, but whom I hardly knew. "Hey," she said, "I just wanted to reach out and apologize for laughing at that toast. To be honest, I always felt Lisa spoke strangely about you. It's as if she was settling for you. It wasn't until the other night that I realized how horrible it was. That wasn't fair to you. That validated what I had begun to suspect. This was not an isolated incident. For a long time, Lisa had been demeaning me, most likely from the start. I considered ourselves on an equal footing. Partners. I was simply the man with the tools, though, to her. Someone she could manipulate and make jokes about when she felt like it. I began mentally reliving our whole relationship, analyzing each strange moment. She told me, "He's not your typical corporate guy, but he's great with his hands," when she first presented me to her parents, or when she confided in her pals. "Yes, he has a business, but it's not as big or demanding as mine." How could I have missed it? How could I have missed the fact that Mom never took pride in me, never shown me any real respect? A week or so later, the true icing on the cake arrived. Jen, Lisa's best friend, called me. I had always been cool with Jen. Although we weren't particularly close, we got along just fine. I assumed she could be calling to mediate a conflict or something when her name appeared on my phone. However, no. Jen said, "I just thought you should know. Lisa has been claiming that she chose you because she believed you would be simple to manage. You would feel too fortunate to have her," she added, "so she didn't think you'd ever leave her." Did she say that really? Even though I knew the answer, I still asked. "Yes," Jen said. At first I didn't want to believe it, but after the party, I did. "I apologize, dude. You're worthy of better." I thanked her, but to be honest, I wasn't sure how to react. Even though I was already over Lisa, hearing it was like a kick in the face. She was treating me like some charity case, and all the while I felt like I was creating a life with someone who considered me as an equal. My life seemed to flip a switch after the dust cleared. I was done with Lisa. No more phone calls, texts, phony excuses, or attempts to change the facts. On my end, things were looking better. Since Lisa wasn't into rustic vacations, I decided to sell my engagement ring and use the proceeds to schedule a trip to the mountains, a destination I'd always wanted to see but never got around to since I immersed myself into my business and took on additional projects. It turns out that seeing the stars while sitting by a campfire is far more enjoyable than listening to others discuss brand synergy over little appetizers. I had plenty of time to consider what I wanted and didn't want throughout that trip. I came to the realization that I had allowed Lisa to determine my value based on her flimsy standards and had spent far too much time attempting to fit in. That was no longer the case. Then, the final slice of karma arrived. A month or so following the celebration, rumor had it that her supervisor had taken notice of her antics at the party and her subsequent behavior. Evidently, the event moved up the ladder after several of her co-workers began discussing it. At work, she has been quite nervous. I was informed by one of her co-workers. She seems to be annoyed by the fact that others are discussing her behind her back. Last week, she even lost her temper with someone at a meeting, which is unusual for her. Lisa stated, "I worked my ass off to get where I am, and now it's like one stupid night is all anyone remembers," in a text message that another mutual acquaintance shared. It seemed to me that the understanding was beginning to set in. I wasn't just lost to her. People who used to respect her were suddenly doubting her judgment, which hurt her professional connections. Although I was not given all the information, I did hear that Lisa's self-representation did not sit well with the higher authorities. Let's just say she wasn't pleased about being passed up for a promotion she had been vying for. I'm not going to lie. Knowing that retribution had finally come up with her gave me a little sense of satisfaction. Her attitude, her need to undermine others in order to elevate herself, and the fact that it seemed like affirmation were the reasons I didn't want her to fail. It was more than simply a relationship issue. She was that person. I'm in a lot better position now, though. I'm happy that I broke things off before getting married and starting a family, and I feel like I made the correct choice every day. In an effort to share my knowledge and inspire others to pursue the trade, I have grown my company, improved my equipment, and even begun instructing aspiring electricians in an evening session. Has changed the game for me. In addition, I've gotten back in touch with people I lost touch with when I was with Lisa. In retrospect, I see how much of my existence revolved around her friends, hobbies, and aspirations. It feels amazing to be concentrating on what brings me joy right now. Since the split, I haven't heard directly from Lisa. She is still sharing her cryptic remarks and likely claiming to be the victim to anybody who would listen. But to be honest, I don't give a damn. To be honest, leaving that relationship was the finest decision I've ever made. It was more than the toast or the celebration. The realization that I should be with someone who appreciates me for who I am, not for how I fit into their story, was the key. One thing I've taken away from all of this is that relationships require respect. You shouldn't strive to stay with someone who doesn't respect you, and you can't love someone you don't respect. So, to anyone who is reading this and is experiencing a similar circumstance, have faith in your instincts. Let someone leave if they are bringing you down rather than up. Later, you'll thank yourself. I appreciate your patience with me over this whole ordeal. I feel like I'm finally back on track after a crazy journey, and you know who to contact if someone ever needs an outlet rewired. Story 3. This narrative has a title. My girlfriend met up with her ex during our anniversary trip, so I canceled her ticket for her return. She is now anxious to get back together. Hello everyone. Prior to starting today's video, I need your assistance. One of the greatest ways you can help us out is to subscribe, since we've observed the channel is losing some of its popularity. It's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. I am a 30-year-old man who has been employed in Manhattan for almost 8 years as a financial analyst. Although it pays well, it's hardly the most glamorous job. Additionally, I've always enjoyed taking care of the individuals I care about. I've been dating Vanessa for the last 3 years. She is stunning, 28, and exuded an air of easy coolness and trendiness. She told me she was trying to become a fashion influencer when we first met, and I must admit that I was impressed by her drive. She had just over 3,000 Instagram followers when we first started dating. She shared a variety of self-portraits, sporadic clothing photos, and several sayings about pursuing one's aspirations. She talked about how she would eventually be recognized and able to work with well-known businesses, but she also made it apparent that she was having difficulty breaking in. But I enjoyed her enthusiasm. You wanted to support her because of the way she spoke about her objectives. Well, I wanted to assist. I wasn't attempting to save her or anything, but I reasoned that if I could help her, why not? Little things like taking her out to fancy restaurants, helping her choose outfits for her posts, or surprise her with items she had mentioned wanting but couldn't afford, were the first things. Every time she said something like, "Oh my God, this is perfect for a shoot," she would become really thrilled. It was amazing to see her light up like that. However, those small things began to grow into larger ones over time. She desired to add fashionable items to her wardrobe. She would add, "I have to demonstrate that I understand the aesthetic if I want brands to notice me." "Yeah, that makes sense," I said. I so began to occasionally purchase for her a high-end purse or ensemble. After that, it stopped being sporadic. The story didn't end there. She soon demanded better photos for her feed, not simply the ones I took while out with my phone. "Experts will have a significant impact," she added. I so covered the cost of many picture shoots with nearby photographers. Because influencers who collaborate with businesses are constantly in hip places, she then had to travel. I therefore covered a few journeys. It was only an investment in her future, and consequently ours, I assured myself. That's what I believed at the time anyhow. Vanessa wasn't totally unappreciative, to be fair. She always grinned broadly when she thanked me, or wrote a heartfelt Instagram post about how fortunate she was to have someone who supported her. But eventually, the thankfulness became second nature, as if she would just cross it off the list and go on to whatever it was she wanted to do next. And to be honest, initially I didn't mind. I wanted her to succeed because I cared about her. She wasn't solely depending on me, though, as time went on. She anticipated it. My journey to Los Angeles around a year ago was a turning point in my life. She was certain that she would network with individuals who might start her career on this trip, so I had covered her airfare and lodging. Rather, she spent the whole afternoon shopping, relaxing by the pool, and snapping selfies. No networking, no gatherings, no attempt to genuinely establish a relationship. "You don't understand how this works," she said dismissively when I gently brought it up. "The first step is to create a picture." I wondered for the first time if I was being used. However, I ignored the idea since, to be honest, I am financially secure. I assumed she needed time to get her bearings and was simply trying to find her way. In addition, we were still content with one another. Or so I believed. At this point, we are on our 3rd anniversary. I wanted it to be memorable and unique for both of us. I thus organized a lavish vacation to Montauk. I went all out and arranged tables at the best restaurants, a stunning suite with views of the beach, and even a few things I thought she might like. Similar to a sunset cruise. I thought she would be ecstatic when I showed her the ideas. However, her response wasn't what I had anticipated. She hesitated before saying, "Montauk is nice. However, I've been itching to see this other seaside village. It's more distinctive and smaller. I've heard nothing but positive things about the stores and restaurants there." Despite the sweetness of her tone, there was something strange about it. Who, after all, looks down on Montauk? She just said, "I think it'll be more romantic," when I asked her why she wanted to travel there in particular. In addition, we had never visited there before. I didn't want to ruin the occasion by disagreeing with her because she was so adamant, so I gave in. It wasn't like I was wed to the concept of Montauk after all. I was glad if it made her happy. That's what I told myself anyhow. In hindsight, that was the first true red flag. Vanessa wasn't only picky about our destination, she had a plan. I simply wasn't aware of it yet. The journey got off to a wonderful start. At least on the surface, Vanessa appeared ecstatic when we arrived at the charming seaside town she had chosen. She was everywhere taking pictures of the room as soon as we got into the hotel. Even the free chocolates on the pillow and the view. "This is going to get so many likes," she said again. Unaware of how much that encapsulated her priorities, I would chuckle along with her. The first day was rather relaxed. We visited a few local stores, had some delicious seafood for lunch, then headed to the beach. Vanessa was radiant, and I couldn't help but think that perhaps letting her choose the location had been the correct decision. Her pleasure was worth it, after all. I told myself that over and over. However, by supper, everything seemed a bit strange. Suddenly, when we were seated in this quaint little Italian restaurant, Vanessa mentioned marriage. She began spinning her fork around her spaghetti. "You know, it's been 3 years since we started dating. It's a long time." I nodded, without giving it any thought. "Indeed, it has been." Grinning, I said, "It seems to have flown past." She returned the smile. However, in this sense, it seemed a bit too planned. "Isn't it time for us to start discussing the future? About getting married, you know?" I was not prepared for this talk on this trip, so I froze for a moment. Please understand that I had nothing against marriage, but we had never discussed it in depth previously. Her timing also seemed off. "It's certainly something to consider, after all." "Are you sure this is something you want to bring up now?" I said warily. Vanessa gave a little giggle, but it fell short of her eyes. "Why not? The vacation is romantic. The ideal moment to discuss our future plans." I tried to seem cool and shrugged. "All right. Bye. What's next? Do you mean something specific?" Her tone changed as she moved closer. "Planning for marriage is a logical first step, isn't it? It's the subsequent action. Additionally, financial matters would be much simpler if we were married. We would discuss everything. No more separating things." It was there. I was unable to pinpoint the reason, but the way she said it made my stomach turn. It had nothing to do with commitment or love. It has to do with money. In an attempt to give myself some time to absorb her words, I took a drink of water. I remarked, "I mean, sharing finances is a big step. To be honest, though, I believe that in order to ensure our mutual protection, I would probably want to discuss a prenuptial agreement first if marriage were on the table." Vanessa's expression transformed in an instant. She set down her fork and looked at me as if I had just insulted her whole family. "A prenuptial agreement?" Her voice was harsh as she repeated, "Why would you ever consider such a thing?" I was surprised at how she responded. In an attempt to diffuse the situation, I hurriedly stated, "It's not about mistrust. It's only a sensible move. You know, it protects both of them." She chuckled, but not in the manner I was accustomed to hearing her laugh. It was dismissive and icy. "Whoa. I was unaware that you believed I would try to use you." "I did not say that," I answered, a little defensive. "Simply said, I believe it's wise to be explicit from the start. It doesn't imply that I don't believe you." Things were tight the next day. On the surface, Vanessa pretended that everything was okay. She chatted about her plans for the day and shared photos of her breakfast on Instagram, with remarks on how much fun she was having on vacation. However, there was an undercurrent of coldness in her interactions with me. She wasn't particularly nasty or cruel, but she wasn't showing as much affection as she typically did. Without really saying anything, it seemed like she was punishing me for the prenuptial discussion. I tried to shrug it off, though. I reasoned that perhaps she simply needed time to think. Relationships aren't always smooth. Not a huge deal. I made the decision to concentrate on having a good time and unwinding. We strolled through the town all morning, stopping at small shops to observe the scenery. Vanessa appeared to soften a little, but occasionally she would say something that caused me to think twice. She once said, "This town is so charming. I'd want to return to that type of area, perhaps with someone who appreciates it." I blinked. "What does that signify?" She laughed and waved me away. "Nothing. All I'm saying is that it's romantic." Throughout the day, little comments like that kept coming up. I told myself that I was thinking too much. However, a part of me kept thinking that something wasn't right. It was more than the remarks or the tension that lingered after dinner. It was her general attitude. She appeared preoccupied, as if her thoughts were elsewhere. Deep within, I was aware that this was more than just small talk to her. She was in love, but she wasn't pushing for marriage. She pushed for it because she believed it would give her access to my life, money, and all the other things that came with being with me. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that the woman I thought I knew wasn't actually the one seated next to me by the time we went to bed. The trip began as usual on the third morning. Vanessa was lying in bed, scrolling through her phone, totally engrossed in whatever influencer content she was seeing. I ordered room service for breakfast after getting up. We decided to spend the morning unwinding before going out to see more of the town. She became alert while we were eating. She pointed to her phone and said, "Oh my God. This iconic bag store is located downtown. They only stock extremely rare items. I would never be able to shop at a store like this back home." In the middle of my toast bite, I nodded. "Sounds cool. Want me to go with you?" Vanessa shook her head quickly, almost too quickly. No, you don't have to. I know shopping isn't really your thing. Besides, it's probably going to take me forever to decide what I want, and I don't want you to be bored. That struck me as odd. We'd been doing everything together on this trip. Why suddenly the need for alone time? But I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. "All right," I said casually. "Just let me know if you need anything." She smiled sweetly. "You're the best," she said, leaning over to kiss my cheek. "I'll probably just be gone an hour or two." An hour or two turned into 4. At first, I didn't think much of it. Vanessa could be indecisive when it came to shopping, especially for big purchases. But as the hours ticked by, I started to feel uneasy. I hadn't gotten a single text or call from her, which was unusual. Vanessa was the kind of person who updated me on everything. Whether she found a cute cafe or tried on a dress she loved, I always got a running commentary today. Quiet. I decided to check our shared credit card to see if she'd made any purchases. Nothing. No charges from the bag shop. No charges from anywhere. That didn't make sense. If she'd been shopping for hours, surely something would have shown up. My gut told me something was off, so I grabbed my jacket and headed out. I wandered downtown for a bit, checking out the shops and keeping an eye out for Vanessa. Eventually, I found myself near the marina, where the town's boardwalk ended in a quiet scenic area, with benches overlooking the water. That's when I saw her. She wasn't alone. Vanessa was sitting on a bench with a man. I immediately recognized Ryan, her ex-boyfriend. He'd popped up in a few of her old Instagram posts when we first started dating, but she assured me they were long over. They were sitting close to close. Vanessa was laughing at something Ryan had said, her hand resting casually on his arm. He leaned in, his body language, comfortable and intimate in a way that made my skin crawl. I stayed where I was, hidden behind a nearby kiosk selling ice cream, and tried to get a handle on my emotions. Part of me wanted to march over there and demand an explanation, but the other part of me told me to wait and watch. That's when I caught bits of their conversation. "You really convinced him to come here?" Ryan asked, smirking. Vanessa laughed, a sound that suddenly grated on me. Naturally. "I told him this town was more romantic and sweet. Talked him a little. He bought it." No questions asked, Ryan grinned. "Well, it worked. I missed you." "I missed you too," Vanessa said, placing a hand on his knee. "Sneaking around has been exhausting." "Soon," Ryan said, leaning closer. "We'll figure it out. Just play along for now. You're too good at this." They laughed again, completely unaware of my presence. My hands were shaking with anger, but I forced myself to stay calm. Pulling out my phone, I snapped a few pictures of them. If Vanessa was going to lie to my face, I needed proof. I walked away, my mind racing. This wasn't just some innocent meetup with an old friend. This was a full-blown secret affair. Vanessa hadn't picked this town for its romantic charm or unique shops. She'd picked it because it was the perfect cover to see Ryan, and I'd been stupid enough to go along with it. When I arrived back to the hotel, I attempted to collect my thoughts. Part of me wanted to confront her the second she stepped through the door, but another part of me wanted to wait. If she was audacious enough to pull this off on a trip I planned and paid for, she'd have no difficulty lying to my face. I needed to see how far she'd go. Vanessa finally arrived a couple of hours later, carrying a shopping bag from the luxury bag shop she'd mentioned before. "Hey," she said brightly, as if nothing was wrong. "I discovered the most amazing bag. You're going to enjoy it." I faked a grin, keeping my tone neutral. "Looks like you had a fantastic time. How much was it?" "Oh, I used cash," she answered hurriedly, avoiding eye contact. That was a clear falsehood. Vanessa never carried cash, and I'd already checked the credit card. The bag shop didn't charge anything. The bag must have been purchased by Ryan. My gut lurched at the prospect, but I remained calm. I remarked nonchalantly, "And the marina?" For a moment, her smile wavered, but then she got it back. "What? Marina?" "Yes, I avoided the water. I spent the entire time in the bag store." I pretended to trust her and nodded. "I understand. It sounds like a successful day." Totally unaware of the hardness in my voice, she smiled. "Thank you for allowing me to do what I wanted to accomplish. I am eager to reveal the bag to you." I remained silent after that. Vanessa carried on with her evening as like nothing had occurred. She showed me the luggage and discussed her plans for the next day. I listened, nodding when appropriate, but I was fuming on the inside. In addition to defrauding me, the lady I believed to be my love had the gall to do it with my money and my confidence. I had already begun making plans for how I was going to deal with this by the time she went to sleep. Vanessa believed she was in charge, but she was going to discover how mistaken she was. I continued playing back everything I had heard and seen at the marina earlier that evening. Vanessa leaned toward Ryan and laughed. They are repulsive inner jokes about my lack of knowledge. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The betrayal was terrible enough, but it was made even worse by her belief that I was foolish enough to fall for it. Vanessa was awake when I eventually forced myself to get out of bed in the morning. She was looking through her phone while relaxing in one of the plush robes provided by the hotel. She looked up and smiled at me as if nothing had occurred, bright and innocent. "Good morning, sweetie. Have you a good night's sleep?" I wanted to confront her immediately, but I refrained from doing so. "Not quite yet." "Yeah, I suppose," I responded in a bland tone. "How about you?" "Like a baby?" With a spectacular stretch, she said. That was what I needed. Yesterday was a long day. As she babbled on about how much she liked the hotel, I nodded and poured myself some coffee, seeming to concentrate on my cup. She added, "I was thinking," as she turned her phone to display an image of a nearby eatery. "Today we may have lunch here. It's adorable. I've also heard that the cuisine is fantastic," I answered, without glancing at the television. Yeah. Already my thoughts were elsewhere. To find out how far she would lie, I had to put her to the test. "What did you do yesterday, then?" I sat down across from her and inquired in a friendly manner. "You were absent for some time." Vanessa didn't even bat an eyelid. "Oh, just going shopping." She gestured with her hand. "That store for bags was amazing. Choosing which one to purchase took me ages." She lied with such confidence and smoothness. "Really? That was nearly stunning." I wasn't finished, though. "Fascinating." I leaned back in my chair and said that. "Yesterday, I thought I spotted you along the marina." Her smile wavered slightly. "The marina? No, I wasn't that person. I stayed away from the water. Then it must have been someone else." I sipped my coffee and shrugged. She seemed to be keeping an eye on me to see if I was on her. I avoided giving anything away by maintaining a neutral expression. Allow her to wriggle. We went to the restaurant she had selected for lunch when it was time. As soon as her drink arrived, Vanessa began snapping photos of the table, the menu, and even herself. With her phone angled perfectly, she added, "This is perfect. It will be adored by my fans. It looks fantastic," I said, hardly listening. My thoughts kept returning to Ryan and how he most likely paid for her foolish bag. I was tempted to ask her directly. I refrained from letting her wriggle. This was something I had to be clever about. I couldn't get the answers I needed by confronting her in public. Vanessa hardly even touched hers when the food arrived. She was too preoccupied with taking pictures and browsing through her phone. At one point, she looked up at me and said, "You're so quiet." "What are you thinking about?" "I guess I'm just tired," I said. "Didn't get much sleep." She smiled sympathetically at me. "Poor little one. All right, let's go easy this afternoon. We could go shopping together. This woman's audacity. I forced a smile as I nodded. It sounds good. We finally arrived at a store that sold handcrafted jewelry. Vanessa turned to me and smiled playfully as she picked up a necklace and held it up to her neck. What are your thoughts? Would my next post look good with this? I said, hardly glancing at it. It's nice. She sulked. Simply lovely. Hurry up, sweetie. You're meant to get me excited. I made myself laugh. Okay, it is beautiful, joyful. Much better, she said, smiling as if she were inquiring about the weather at the time. She brought up marriage once more. This woman's sheer courage. She had been lying to me and sneaking around with her ex, and now she was discussing getting married. I had the impression that I was in the twilight zone. I said carefully, I mean, it's something to think about. However, I don't believe we have to jump right in. Although she didn't push, Vanessa didn't seem happy with that response. She must have clipped her tone. But after a while, correct. Finally. I hoped that would put an end to the discussion. The morning of our departure started early. I slipped out of bed quietly and grabbed my phone. Checking the photos I'd taken at the marina, every time I glanced at them, I felt a mix of fury and satisfaction. Anger because of what she'd done, and satisfaction because I got the proof I needed to finally leave this charade of a relationship. She believed she'd played me, but the game was about to shift. I packed my things, careful not to create too much noise. Vanessa didn't stir. Of course she didn't. This was someone who could sleep through a thunderstorm. Once my suitcase was ready, I took one last glance at her. I felt nothing, no grief, no regret, no second thoughts, just a silent, smoldering wrath on my way out of the room. I stopped at the hotel's front desk. The clerk smiled kindly as I handed her the key, leaving early. She inquired. Yes, I stated in a light-hearted manner. But only me. My girlfriend is going to remain here for a little while longer. Without questioning it, the cashier nodded. I made the last payment on the accommodation and gave Vanessa instructions to let her know that her stay had been extended at her own cost. After that, I canceled her return ticket using my airline app. I didn't want to make her life any easier after what she'd done, even if it felt frigid. My phone was exploding with Vanessa's texts by the time I arrived at the airport. I must have left a letter on the nightstand, and when she woke up, she found me gone. I had been succinct and direct. Have fun on your long trip. For me, say hello to Ryan. The messages were first unclear. Where are you, Vanessa? Have you had coffee or something? Then they were panicked. Did you go, Vanessa? What on earth is the purpose of this note? Extended vacation, what do you mean? At last they were angry. You canceled my ticket, Vanessa. Are you serious now? It's really theatrical of you. None of them received a response from me. Rather, I switched my phone to quiet and got on my plane. I was thinking about Vanessa in the motel the entire time, knowing that she was stranded in a place hours away from home, without a ticket, and probably without enough cash to get one for herself. Without my help, she was aware of how financially reliant she was on me. Her well-planned existence as an influencer would unravel. Upon returning home, I saw a deluge of missed calls and texts on my phone. Vanessa had gone through all the stages, begging, furious, accusing, and, in the end, desperate. Please, Vanessa. Let's have a conversation. This is crazy. I didn't even do anything wrong, Vanessa. You're going overboard. Vanessa, there's not enough money for me to travel home. How should I proceed? It was her final message that made me chuckle out. You're making me feel ashamed, Vanessa. How do you think I'll seem as a result of this? She always put it first. The appearance of things. Not that she had been caught in the act of lying. Not the treachery. Not even the years she had been abusing me. No, her reputation was her greatest worry. Vanessa. Classic. I didn't respond. I didn't feel the need to provide her with any closure or an explanation. She had to live with the decisions she had made. There was a calmness about me. I had lost my anger. I wasn't depressed. I had just finished. The days that followed were calm. I removed Vanessa from all of my social media accounts and banned her number. A couple of our common acquaintances inquired about the situation. It seems that Vanessa had already begun to fabricate her version of events, giving the impression that I had suddenly left her. However, The reality became evident when I sent them the photos of her with Ryan at the marina. It's unbelievable that she did that. According to one buddy, that's really low. I always thought she was a little strange. Another acknowledged, without her, you'll be better off. Better off. That sentence stayed with me. I felt as though I could finally devote myself without someone depleting my resources and energy, something I hadn't done in years. Conversely, Vanessa was not doing so well. Although I didn't care enough to learn how her influencer aspirations began to fall apart without my financial assistance, I heard through the grapevine that she ultimately made it home. Her engagement plummeted because she was unable to provide her fans with the opulent lifestyle they had come to anticipate. She unexpectedly arrived at my residence a week later. I didn't open the door far enough to let her in, but I did open it enough to glimpse her face. She had a horrible appearance, untidy hair, puffy eyes, and none of the flawless appearance she consistently displayed on the internet. Please. Her voice wavered as she spoke. Give me 5 minutes, please. I can describe everything. I just felt indifferent as I looked at her for a while. There's no need to explain. I said, Vanessa, you didn't make a mistake. You must now face the repercussions of your decision. She began to cry, but I remained motionless. She choked on her words and said, I was stupid. I didn't think. Ryan doesn't matter to me. You are important to me. No. What I can do for you is what matters to you. I'm done with that, I said firmly. I locked the door after shutting it. As she left, her muffled sobs subsided, and I felt lighter than I had in a long time. I had no regrets because this was the conclusion she deserved. I was inundated with messages from friends when I woke up the following morning. On Instagram, Vanessa reportedly launched a full-fledged pity campaign by sharing cryptic tales of being deceived and beginning anew. Sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who have wounded you the most, according to a friend who even emailed me a snapshot of a post she authored. I couldn't contain my laughter. When she was the one sneaking around with her ex, this woman's attempt to portray herself as the victim was quite bold. However, I didn't feel compelled to participate. Allow her supporters to accept whatever narrative she was fabricating. I had nothing to demonstrate. Sarah, one of our common pals, texted me that afternoon. She had never been swayed by Vanessa's influence or behavior. She had always been a straight shooter. She wrote Vanessa, huh? Vanessa is attempting to paint you as the villain. However, I informed her that I was aware of the truth. Please let me know if you would want me to speak to anybody. Although I was grateful for the gesture, I didn't want to expend any more energy on Vanessa. I said, thanks, but I'm fine. Permit her to dig her own tomb. And she dug. I began to hear more and more over the course of the next week about how Vanessa's life was falling apart without me paying for her clothing, vacations, and professional picture sessions. Her image as an influencer began to crumble. Her fans were accustomed to seeing her relaxing in opulent hotels, sipping lattes at trendy cafes, and wearing fine clothes. She was now forced to pretend to live that way on a tight budget, but it wasn't working. She shared a picture of herself in the same clothing from the previous week. People in the comments are beginning to realize that Sarah texted me one day. I received a link to one of Vanessa's Instagram stories from a friend, in which she discussed eschewing material possessions and adopting a minimalist lifestyle. Given that this was the same woman who previously told me she couldn't wear the same clothing twice because it would destroy her appearance, it was amusing. The nicest part was that she had been dumped by Ryan, the man she had risked everything for. Through a common contact, I learned that he had left as soon as Vanessa's financial condition became apparent. He's not attempting to act like a father figure to her. She's on her own now, they remarked. Excellent, she was worthy. However, rescheduling the vacation to Montauk was the finest move I did, the one I had planned before Vanessa took over. This time, I went alone, and it was just the way I wanted it to be. I once looked at Vanessa's account, but all I saw were intermittent, now hazy mirror selfies, a few depressing attempts at a thrift haul film, and strange, inspirational phrases. Her fan base had drastically shrunk, and the remarks were harsh. Your lover used to treat you. Where is he now? Someone wrote. Another remarked, fake influencer vibes. It was an odd mixture of sympathy and delight. Life was becoming better back in Manhattan. After years of putting it off, I finally started attending to therapy. I find that discussing things with someone helps me get over my hurt and rage. I was carrying without even realizing it. I discovered a lot about who I am, how I should create stronger boundaries going ahead, why I allowed someone like Vanessa into my life, and why I disregarded the warning signs for so long. Sarah was the final person to tell me about Vanessa. It seems that Vanessa was attempting to reinvent herself as a lifestyle coach when she returned to live with her parents. Unbelievable. Sarah sent a text. She is suddenly behaving as though she is a self-help expert. Is this unbelievable? I shook my head and chuckled. Give it to her. I no longer give a damn. That's it. I got my life back and Vanessa received what was due to her. Tell me your thoughts. Reddit. Have you ever dealt with a person like this? Story 4. As they are grieving over my stepdaughter, my entitled wife wants me to let her deadbeat ex-husband live with us. I was persuaded to concur by her relatives. I let her entire family to witness her cheating on me with him. Hi everyone. Prior to starting today's video, I need your assistance. One of the greatest ways you can help us out is to subscribe, since we've observed the channel is losing some of its popularity. It's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. Reddit, hello. Before we go into this issue, let me give you some history. I didn't merely sign up for a wife when I married Melissa, a 35-year-old woman, at the age of 36. For a child who deserved better than the hand she had been handed, I signed up. Compared to Anna's biological parents, I was a better dad to her stepdaughter. Rick, Anna's father, was the type of man who believed that he was a decent parent if he showed up once a year with a cheap birthday present. For a weekend, he would act like the devoted father, then disappear for months at a time. Melissa did not fare much better. She lived with Anna, to be sure, but she was more concerned with maintaining her flawless Instagram profile than with being a mother. PTA gatherings? Not at all. Assisting with homework? Ignore it. She was even unable to recall Anna's instructors' names. I made a commitment to myself when I entered Anna's life. I would be the father she deserved. And I fulfilled my pledge. I attended all of the school plays, conferences, parent-teacher conferences, and soccer matches. When she was anxious about a big test, I gave her motivational speeches and stayed up late helping her with science projects. She wanted stylish dad braids like those her friends' moms wore, so I even learned how to do it. Our relationship went beyond the typical stepdad-stepdaughter interaction between Anna and me. She had a crush on a boy at school, but she trusted me more than she trusted anybody else. When she had her first period, Melissa was too preoccupied scrolling through her phone to notice that I was the one she turned to for help. It was me who hurried to the shop to get her supplies and check on her. I was more than a stepfather. Her safe haven was me, so I was devastated when Anna died. She was just 14. It was unjust and abrupt. Additionally, it left a hole in my heart that I doubt will ever completely close. I knew I had to be the strong one, though, even in my grief. Melissa was a complete mess. It makes sense. However, she checked out entirely. I'm responsible for Bill. Plans for the funeral. Me, once again. I'm relieving my family members. I loved Anna, so I didn't whine. And I believed that my love for Melissa was sufficient to bear the burden for us both. Melissa then made the most absurd suggestion I had ever heard in an attempt to gauge how much I could handle. A week or so had passed since Anna's funeral. Melissa gave me this depressing, pathetic look as we sat in the living room. I assumed she would mention how difficult the day had been, or how much she missed Anna. Rather, she struck me with this treasure. Rick ought to move in with us, in my opinion. I looked at her in anticipation of her giggling or claiming it was a joke. She didn't. Do you want to move in with your ex-husband? I inquired, to make sure I didn't get it wrong. He is in mourning, she said, as if that clarified everything. There is no one else for him. Additionally, I believe that he would benefit from being around people who are sympathetic to his situation. What I was hearing was unbelievable. Melissa, Rick is a grown man. He can figure out his own life. Why is it our responsibility to take care of him? She gave me this look like I was some heartless monster. He's Anna's father, she said, as if that meant anything. I shut it down immediately. No, absolutely not. He's not moving in here. That should have been the end of it. But then her family got involved. I don't know what Melissa told them, but suddenly I was getting calls and texts from her mom, her sister, even her dad. Her mom was the worst. "You need to think about what Anna would have wanted," she said, as if Anna would have been thrilled to have her deadbeat dad crashing in her house. Her sister wasn't much better. She sent me this long text about how Rick was part of the family and how I needed to put my pride aside for the sake of healing. Even her dad, who usually stayed out of this kind of stuff, called me up to say, "Look, I know it's not ideal, but Rick's going through a hard time. Maybe you could help him out for a little while." I wanted to scream. These people had no idea what they were asking of me. They weren't the ones who'd have to deal with Rick lounging around the house, eating my food and contributing. Absolutely nothing. They weren't the ones who would have to deal with the awkward tension of having their wife's ex-husband under the same roof, but they wouldn't let up. Melissa kept bringing it up, too, always with that same sad, guilt-trippy tone. "There is no one else for him," she'd say, like it was my fault he was a loser or it's just temporary. You know, he's not asking for much. Not asking for much. He was asking for a free ride in a house I paid for under a roof. I maintained eating food I bought. If that's not asking for much, I don't know what is. After a week of this nonsense, I finally gave in. Not because I wanted to, but because I was tired of the constant nagging. "Fine," I said, "but there are rules. He stays in the guest room. He contributes to the house and he stays out of my way. Got it?" Melissa nodded, acting all grateful, but I could see the smug little smile she was trying to hide. She thought she'd won, and maybe she did for the moment. But deep down, I knew this wasn't going to end well. I just had to wait for them to screw up. And trust me, they would. So Rick moved in, and from the very first day, the guy made it clear he was going to be a problem. He showed up with 2 duffel bags and a cheap 6-pack of drinks, like he was crashing at a buddy's place for the weekend instead of moving into my house. I was already irritated, but I kept my cool. I told myself, let him settle in. Maybe he'll surprise you. The first thing he did was take over the guest room. Now, when I say guest room, I don't mean some luxury suite. It's a small room with a twin bed, a dresser, and a closet. Nothing fancy, but perfectly fine for someone who's supposed to be staying temporarily. Rick, however, treated it like a hotel within a day. His stuff was everywhere. Clothes on the floor, empty cans on the nightstand, and some crusty old pillow he brought that smelled like it hadn't been washed in years. Melissa, of course, was all. "He's just settling in. Give him a break." All right. I gave him a break. But then the real nonsense started. First, he had no sense of boundaries. The dude acted like he owned the area. He'd go into the kitchen shirtless as I was preparing coffee, scratching his stomach like some comedy trash. He'd take over the living room to watch whatever filth he wanted, leaving his dirty socks on the couch and the food. Don't get me started on the cuisine. Don't get me. I'd come home looking forward to a supper, only to find that Rick had helped himself to everything in the fridge. Leftover lasagna, gone. The steak I was saving for the weekend. He cooked it for lunch. I even caught him drinking right out of the milk container when I called him out on it. He shrugged and replied, "I'll get more tomorrow." But he never did. Melissa, she hardly spoke. She would dismiss my complaints with justifications. "He's still getting used to it. He just does it that way. Try not to be too rigid." I was going crazy in the meanwhile. However, Rick's freeloading wasn't the worst aspect. It was the intimacy between him and Melissa. I initially convinced myself that I was dreaming. Grief does strange things to people, don't you think? Perhaps their common suffering was what brought them together. However, it became more difficult to ignore the more I observed. They were watching a movie on the couch when I arrived home from work late one evening. There is nothing wrong with that. Melissa, however, was seated far too near, like a close thigh contact. When I entered, she sprung to her feet, seeming to be guilty. "Oh," she responded, "we were only observing something," as if that clarified anything. My gut was screaming, but I remained silent. There was a problem. From then, it became worse. Melissa began to spend more time with Rick, always coming up with reasons to be with him. "Oh, I simply wanted to see how he was doing." Anna was the topic of our conversation. He wanted assistance sorting through his belongings. I woke up at approximately 2 in the morning one night. and discovered that Melissa wasn't in her bed. When I woke up to find her, I saw her and Rick sitting in the kitchen, laughing and whispering as if they were at a high school sleepover. They both froze like children caught sneaking cookies when they spotted me. "What's happening?" I asked, trying to sound cool despite my inward rage. Rick muttered an apology before creeping back to his room as Melissa stumbled something about simply chatting. Although I hadn't pushed it yet, I began to listen more intently after that. The warning signs continued to mount. For example, when I saw Melissa sitting on Rick's bed, assisting him with folding his clothes, or when she decided to keep Rick company while he was feeling low by skipping supper with me. I heard them conversing in the living room one day. Rick made a stupid joke that made Melissa laugh, and I overheard her remark, "You're so funny. I've forgotten your humor. I forgot." How long had she been remembering how amusing Rick used to be? To see how Melissa would respond if I even suggested that Rick could be staying too long, I began to test the waters by gently bringing him up in discussions. She would get protective. "No one is bothered by him. He is still in mourning. You're exaggerating the situation." A few weeks later, the last straw. Rick's shirt was among our clothing as I was searching the laundry room for something. Not just any shirt, though. He donned his filthy, discolored undershirt to unwind. Melissa seemed agitated when I brought it up to her. To conserve water, I simply put it in with our belongings. Conserve water. I looked at her as I said, "When did you start caring about conserving water?" She had nothing to say. She only said something and turned to go. I had no hard evidence, but I sensed something was wrong. I considered going straight to her, but I knew she would simply deceive me. "You're acting suspiciously. It's all in your head. You're going overboard." I had to defeat them in a way they couldn't resist if I wanted to succeed. Okay. I was tired of being kind by now. Rick was taking advantage of others. Melissa was behaving quite suspiciously. Furthermore, I had had enough of being portrayed as the villain in my own house. They had another thing coming if they believed they could bullshit me and get away with it. Without evidence, I wasn't going to take them on directly. No, I required something that was indisputable, something that would reveal them in a way that they couldn't avoid with words. I thought of the strategy at that point. I was drinking coffee one morning when I noticed Melissa and Rick whispering to one another across the kitchen table as if they were planning a covert operation. Her family had been constantly telling me that Rick was family and that we had to help him. All right, their own remarks would be used against them by me. I made the decision to host an unexpected family dinner, a large one. Melissa's sisters, parents, and cousins. Whoever had ever attempted to blame me for Rick. I pretended to be doing something kind, as if I were the kind-hearted one. They all acted as though I wasn't. I called her mother first. "Hello? I have been contemplating. Laying it on thick," I said. "We've all been going through a difficult time, so I believe we ought to do something extra special for Melissa and Rick. You know, something to show them, like a surprise dinner. For them, we're all here." She devoured it. "Oh, that's a really good idea. It would mean so much to them, in my opinion." Her smile was so clear over the phone that I could almost hear it. Her mother offered to bring a casserole right away. The rest of the family was on board before I knew it. Everyone was complimenting me on my thoughtfulness and kindness in planning this. Trust me, they were going to get a front row seat to the truth, so I let them believe whatever they wanted. Making sure Melissa had no suspicions was crucial to the strategy. I informed her that if we went out for drinks after work, I might even stay at a friend's house because I would be working late that evening. "Avoid waiting up," I said nonchalantly. She didn't question it at all. I was planning the entire thing in the meantime. Sharina. I made sure that everyone arrived at the house at precisely 6 o'clock. It would have been shortly after Rick and Melissa had become accustomed to their routine of sitting around like a couple of jobless characters. I left for work as usual on the day of the dinner, but I ran errands to get ready instead of going to the office. At 5:45 p.m., I wasn't going to let these people leave me with a sink full of dishes, so I grabbed some drinks, some snacks, and some disposable plates. I waited for everyone to arrive after parking a few blocks from the house. The first people there were Melissa's parents, who pulled up with a cake and a huge casserole dish. Soon after, her sisters arrived, accompanied by a few cousins who brought drinks and side dishes. We had a full house by 6 p.m., and I was giddy with anticipation. "All right, everyone," I said, addressing the group. "We're going to head inside. Set everything up and then I'll go get Melissa. She has no idea, so act surprised when she comes down. They all nodded, smiling and whispering about how thoughtful this was. I unlocked the door, let them in, and we quietly started setting up in the dining room. Now here's where it gets good. After everything was in place, I motioned for Melissa's mom to come with me. You should be the one to wake her up, I said. It'll be a nice surprise. She agreed, of course, and followed me upstairs. I walked to the bedroom, opened the door without knocking, and boom, there they were. Melissa and Rick half-dressed, tangled up in the sheets of my bed. I don't think I'll ever forget the sound of Melissa's mom yelling, "What the hell is this?" As she stood frozen in the doorway of my bedroom. Her voice was loud enough to shake the whole house and probably half the neighborhood. It was the type of situation you'd see in a trashy reality program. Except this was my true life. Rick, the miserable excuse of a guy, was trying to pull on his pants like he'd just recalled how garments worked. Melissa, she just sat there, hugging the covers to her chest, her face pallid and blotchy. I'd never seen her look so guilty, and that's saying something considering Melissa is not exactly a stranger to dodgy conduct. However, this was another level. Surprise supper, I remarked, leaning nonchalantly against the doorframe. Thought you'd love the family support, considering everything you've been going through. The turmoil spread like wildfire. Melissa's mom turned to me, her countenance a mix of amazement and betrayal. What is going on here? Oh, you know. I shrugged as I spoke. Rick and Melissa are the only ones who are keeping each other warm during their grief. The rest of the family came upstairs at that point, which was really touching. Melissa's father first, followed by her sisters. Lastly, her cousins, who were all attracted by the ruckus. Craning their necks to see what was going on, they crowded around. They were able to piece everything together quickly. The first to speak was Stephanie, one of her sisters. Melissa? What the devil? Melissa was able to speak at last, albeit not very well. It is not what it appears to be. Tears were flowing down her cheeks as she blurted out, "Yes, that's precisely how it seems," I fired back. "When you're mourning, you don't wind up in bed with your ex-husband half naked." Rick, on the other hand, had his pants only half zipped and was attempting to get by everyone. Melissa's father glared at him once and blocked him. He hissed, "You piece of crap, you're not going anywhere." Let me now tell you about Melissa's father. Although he doesn't make a lot of noise, you can tell when he's upset. Rick muttered something about not wanting to start a fight as he froze like a deer in headlights. "Not a problem," the father of Melissa roared. "You believe you're not creating trouble while you're sleeping with someone else's wife in their home?" The rest of the family was joining in by now. Her cousins were shaking their heads in disdain, her sisters were screaming, and her mother was sobbing. "Did your hubby take care of everything for you?" Melissa was yelled at by Stephanie. "And you pay him back like this?" Melissa continued to sob while reciting the same pitiful statement. "It was an error. It was an error. An error." I murmured as I entered the room at last. "Melissa, this was not an isolated incident. Hasn't this been going on for weeks? Months, perhaps?" The only assurance I needed was that she didn't respond. Rick opened his lips to speak, but Melissa's father interrupted him. "Don't even try," he warned in a low, menacing voice. "The very fact that you are here says enough." The entire scene resembled a slow-motion automobile wreck. Terrible. However, you were unable to turn away. I just stood aside and let the family take care of the task while they continued to pile on. I finally held out my hand to signal everyone to stop. "All right," I answered in a forceful yet composed tone. "Melissa, I believe we've all seen enough. Rick, get your belongings together. Leave my house. You're both finished here." Melissa began to beg. Naturally. "Could we just chat, please?" I was wrong. "I cherish you." I genuinely laughed. "Do you adore me? Is that the reason you've been living under my roof with your ex? Keep it. Melissa, you've already proven yourself to me." I resisted her attempt to take my arm. "You never return from this," I said icily. "It cannot be fixed. Don't speak." "It's out. We're finished." Rick finally found his voice as he realized that things were about to grow worse for him. "Look, I'm sorry, dude. This is not what I intended to happen. I had no intention of that happening." I said it again, sarcasm leaking from my voice. You often stumbled and fell into my wife's bed by mistake." He probably didn't have a response to it, so, like the cowardly fool he is, he just stood there and stared at the ground. When Melissa's mother eventually intervened, she turned to Rick and spoke in a tone that was venomous. "You have to get out now. Additionally, you should never again approach this family." Melissa's father was not amenable to Rick's attempts to argue. He responded, "You heard her," and moved ahead. "Leave." Rick gathered his belongings and ran away. He muttered something about how he wasn't worthy of this, like he was the victim in this situation. But Melissa remained still. She simply sat sobbing and begging on the bed. "Just give me another opportunity, please." "Why?" My voice was steady as I spoke, "So that you can repeat it. No, Melissa, you made a decision. You now have to deal with it." Her parents didn't even give her a glance. Even though her sisters continued to shout, it was obvious that they no longer supported her. "I believe you ought to depart as well." At last, her mother spoke in a chilly tone. "You are no longer welcome here." I didn't feel sorry for Melissa, even though she appeared to be absolutely broken. Not by any means. She had to rest in her bed, which she had literally made. Melissa didn't depart softly, to start. "Oh no." She cried loudly enough for the neighbors to hear, packed her belongings, and muttered that I would never comprehend what she was going through. I said very little. What might be said, but I did intervene when she inadvertently grabbed some of my belongings. "I own that," I replied as I took the watch out of her bag that she had given me for our anniversary. "Things that are not yours to take. No more." Her eyes were swollen and red as she just gazed at me. "You're being so aloof." She gave a whiff. "Chilled?" I laughed as I spoke. "In my own home, in my own bed, you betrayed me, and it's me who's being aloof. Melissa, be honest." She stopped talking after that. She hurried out for a moment, whispering to herself that she would always regret this. What I wanted her to feel was good remorse. Okay, so Melissa wasn't there. Rick had left. The entire place smelled of cheap cologne and deception. However, at least the rubbish was removed at last. You would think that things would settle down at this point, wouldn't they? No, the drama had only barely begun. Of course, there was still plenty to do. Divorce paperwork, tidying up the mess they'd created, and determining how to communicate all of this to others who weren't present. At least the poison was no longer present. The days that followed were, to put it mildly, fascinating. After quickly defending Rick and pressuring me to allow him to move in, Melissa's folks completely changed their mind. The morning following the big announcement, her mother gave me a call. Her voice was unsteady as she began. "I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry. We really shouldn't have pressured you to allow Rick to stay." "Yes, you ought not to have." Without trying to sugarcoat things, I said. "However, you did. You have just witnessed the true nature of Rick and Melissa. Hopefully, it was worthwhile." I didn't stay to comfort her when she began to weep. I was no longer employed there. Then her sisters came along. Stephanie sent me a lengthy text message in which she expressed her embarrassment at Melissa and her inability to comprehend her own sister's betrayal of me. I answered, "She didn't just betray me. She also betrayed you all. You all supported Rick. You all fell for her lies. Perhaps the next time, you'll put your faith in the man who truly provides for your family rather than the jerk who can't even keep his trousers on." I appreciated Stephanie's many apologies, but I wasn't in the mood to be polite. Melissa's father, however, took a different approach. He arrived at my home carrying a sandwich and a case of beverages. "None of that was fair to you." Before he eventually said something, we sat on the porch and drank in quiet. "You've always had my respect," he remarked. "Rick could never expect to be as manly as you have been. I apologize that we didn't realize what was going on sooner. It seemed genuine, but it wasn't much." "Well, at least now you know the truth," I remarked, nodding. I didn't spend any time getting things started in the days that followed. The day after Melissa moved out, I phoned my lawyer and instructed him to prepare the necessary paperwork. Naturally, Melissa attempted to drag things out. She persisted in phoning and messaging, suggesting that we discuss the situation and find a solution. "Nothing needs to be fixed," I informed her. Melissa, you broke it. We were broken by you. Proceed after signing the documents. She waited for a few weeks, presumably in the hopes that I would reconsider. Naturally, I didn't. She signed the documents and returned them with a letter that said, "Last but not least, I'm not going anywhere. I will always cherish you." Yes, Melissa, you certainly will. You couldn't keep your hands off your ex because you love me so much. Very convincing. Melissa had the audacity to make a claim for spousal maintenance immediately after she signed the divorce papers. She claimed that because she had given up her work to support me, I owed her because she had been a stay-at-home wife. Breaking. Melissa never had a job. Taking photos and feigning busyness on Instagram was her full-time job. When my lawyer and I examined the documents, we chuckled. But we didn't stop there. I had bank statements, receipts, proof of her extravagant spending, and evidence that I was the one who paid for everything, even her expensive skincare items. Trust me, my lawyer set to work, and we were prepared to discredit her in court. But this is when things start to get nice. Melissa probably believed that her family would support her. A huge error. They became much more hostile against her after learning what she was attempting to do. Her mother contacted me again in a rage. "She is attempting to get money from you, following all that she did." She shouted, "This is unacceptable to us." Her normally calm father was furious. If it came to that, he volunteered to testify against her. "You're not giving her any money," he informed me. "Not after how she handled us and you." After the whole infidelity scandal was over, even her sisters, who had been undecided, changed their minds. "I'll testify if she takes this to court," Stephanie texted me. "I'll tell the judge everything, even the affair and her deceit about you." Melissa must have heard about this since she contacted me in tears, pleading with me to resolve the matter peacefully. She even said things like, "We can handle this like adults, and I just want what's fair." "You don't deserve to use that word after what you've done," I informed her bluntly. She made an attempt to guilt-trip me. "You're only making things worse, even though I've already lost everything," she cried. I was honest with her. "Your own decisions caused you to lose everything. This is no longer my issue." The icing on the cake. She attempted to say that Rick had persuaded her to pursue my money after realizing she was losing. Yes, in order to protect herself, she put him under the bus. Melissa, classic. After it became evident that her whole family and everybody with any kind of decency were prepared to defeat me, she abandoned her absurd claim. I didn't give her any money, and our divorce was finalized by the court without any drama on my part. Regarding Rick, yes, he received just what he was due. As soon as word got out about what had transpired, nobody wanted to interact with him. He attempted to contact Melissa's family in the hopes that they would feel sorry for him, but they refused. In fact, her father informed me that if Rick returned to his house, he would contact the police. I've heard that Rick was expelled for being a slob after spending some time staying on a friend's couch. When I last looked, he was still acting like the victim in all of this while residing in a dilapidated hotel. Melissa's situation was not much better. Her entire family turned against her. Her sister stopped asking her to family gatherings, and her mother stopped talking to her for weeks. Naturally, she attempted to play the victim by telling anybody who would listen that she made a mistake and was overcome with sadness, but nobody believed her. Not after what they witnessed. Rumor had it that she had moved in with a friend, but I was unaware of the whole situation. That agreement won't survive long, in my opinion. In the end, people like Melissa inevitably reveal their actual selves. Then, about a month ago, I received a message from Stephanie, one of her sisters. She informed me that Melissa's sob tale was not going as planned. She was apparently ejected by her buddy. Why? Because Melissa didn't bother to repay the money she borrowed from her without asking. Traditional. Melissa. She is currently moving between friends' couches. According to Stephanie's statements, she has ruined practically all of her relationships. She is not even accepted by her mother. She must work things out for herself. Stephanie was informed by her mother. To be honest, I didn't believe her family had the capacity to hold her responsible. However, here we are. This is where things start to get very crazy. Stephanie sent me some juicy rumors a few weeks ago. Rick and Melissa made an effort to get back together. Yes, you read correctly. They believed they could play house together after all the upheaval. Melissa apparently found Rick and persuaded him that they ought to start afresh. She presumably reasoned that because they were both at their lowest, they should sing together. That continued for a total of 2 weeks. Being Rick, he was unable to maintain his composure long enough to pull it off. Melissa finally understood that he would not suddenly transform into a nice human being. He was still his entitled, lazy self. After a furious altercation that resembled yelling in public, Melissa ejected him from their lodging. She's back on her own now. Rick has returned to living in his vehicle. Isn't it poetic? Let's now discuss myself. Cleaning the house, physically and figuratively, took up part of my time. I threw out everything that made me think of Melissa and Rick, including the bedroom's furnishings, photographs, and linens. Time for a new beginning. Although it's not flawless, life is better. And to be honest, I'm pleased with how I manage things. I had the option to blow everything up, but I chose not to. I revealed the truth, resolved the issue, and went on. People occasionally inquire as to whether I would ever forgive Melissa or give her another opportunity. I always give the same response. Absolutely not. It is overrated to forgive, particularly when the recipient is undeserving. Thus, I am living my life to the fullest while Rick and Melissa cope with the fallout from their deeds. Even if karma takes time to manifest, it always does, and it's a lovely sight to see when it does.